Hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours, where we answer your questions 7 days a week. Alexander Knight's our reader today. Alex, what's up first?
First question's from Caleb Groom in Pinehurst, North Carolina. Do any panelists have experience using audience feedback systems, example, quiz, poll, word cloud, during a show? I have a system picked out. Do you have any advice for a producer when using his info?
Bill?
Yeah, I have some advice, but Alex finally raised his hand on this, and he is an expert at this. So I'm just going to give you kind of the basics of what I have figured out, mostly from being a host here on Office Hours. What are you trying to get accomplished? And the thing that I'm most concerned about as somebody who's done some of this, but not a ton of this, is that trying to handle audience questions without some back-end system that lets them be vetted and put into the proper order can be a huge distraction. And I always really struggle if I'm on a different program format and I have to do this by myself. To pull your thought process from the show, depending on your role in the show, to try to manage this can be it's a big cognitive load. And so when you have a system like the one that Alex designed for this program, where there are people in the back end who are vetting the questions, making sure that you don't get bombed or something in there, and managing them so that you get quality questions, and then you can really handle it. And it's a huge boon to the show because people love seeing things like poll results and things like that. It's a great engagement boost. But boy, if you don't have a system like that, again, just from the point of view of somebody who hosts shows a good little bit now, when it pulls you away from things, it can really make it a more scattered audience presentation to try to handle them too much. That's my 2 cents. I was hoping Alex would be here because he's an expert in this.
Alex?
Yeah, I've been doing online events for about 20 years, and of course we built a Q&A system, and it has polling, and it's capable of quizzing, and I don't do word clouds. I have a bad habit of making fun of word clouds. And here's the issue with a lot of this is, are we doing this for the production or are we doing this for the audience? And so most of the audience feedback tools are there because it makes you get to check off that you had audience interaction and so on and so forth. You feel like there's conversations internally, but most of those conversations are not based on reality. Like the reality is the one thing that makes a difference is letting the audience ask questions. Like it is, and letting them ask them often and letting them ask them early and getting to them. It's why this show is all Q&A, but that we don't see anything moving the needle. You'll get people to respond to a quiz or a poll or I guess you don't have to respond to a word cloud, but it's a very small percentage of the folks. So I think that there's I'm not saying you can't do them, but they just don't mean anything. Like they don't matter in an event. Like just to be totally flat, like they just don't matter that much, And we may do, we play with polls here and there, and it's kind of fun to add them every once in a while to see what people think. But the only thing that people really want is to steer the conversation towards what they're interested in, and be part of that conversation. And so think really hard about how you use questions. A lot of people are resistant to questions because, as Bill said, they don't have good ways to manage the questions. And that's why we built the tool that we built, was because, you have to be able to manage the questions effectively. Now, the most effective thing is, there is one thing that's more effective than questions, and it's what we call kinetic interaction, which means the audience can affect something on the stage. That is on fire. Like it is the most crazy. We've not done an event yet where we haven't, like the audience just stops listening to us and that's all they care about. So there's that may not, but we call that fissionable because we still haven't figured out how to contain it. So, but anyway, that there is one that's more popular than the questions, but those two are, from my experience over the last 20 years and a couple thousand events, are the only ones that really move the needle in a meaningful way. The other ones are more for the people doing the shows, thinking that they created interaction, but no one remembers them.
Guy?
Yeah, it depends on which one you want to use. There's quite a few out there, and you'll want to see how other folks have used them to see if they've been effective. One that I really like is Tagboard. That lets users put images as well. So the nice thing is to have somebody curating this stuff. So if you're asking any advice for a producer, you really want staff that, and ideally multiple, that can flag certain items. So depending on which system you use, Slido, Mentimeter, Mukana, whatever it is, even actually Zoom Graphics Toolkit, you want a team that can curate, especially if it starts moving super fast, because on some of these you can get thousands of comments or interactions per minute or per second if it's a really big event. And then the other thing is just rehearse the heck out of it, because I can't count the amount of times that I've had this stuff fail and or just not go according to plan because the presenter just didn't take the time to rehearse. So it's a different load when you're rehearsing with just a couple versus when you get the full brunt of all of the interactions coming fast, and how you curate that and present it on the screen. So everybody should be on the same page with downstage monitors or some kind of prompter to be able to let the talent know this is where we're going.
Alex?
And then, if you have a way to manage the questions on the back end, any kind of login on the front end will reduce the interaction by 95%. And I'm not over exaggerating. So any login, if you have to decide whether you're trying to do lead generation or you're trying to close it up. If you're not letting them see the questions, people will not troll you too much because they don't get any positive feedback. Like, people worry about that. But so if you're taking, like, we use a QR code. This one here for this show, right? So this is a QR code, and I use this in all kinds of shows, and that QR code dumps them all into a system that we can see. We get some bad questions. We don't care. But in large events that I do, we will get 30 to 35% of the audience will ask a question to kind of put the volume on it. And some of those, that's 3,000, 4,000, up to, I think the highest we've gotten is 6,000 or 7,000 questions in 8 minutes, 10 minutes. So these will just hoover in. But if you put anything on the front end, people will go in there and go, nah, it's not. My question isn't important enough to do that. So it is a huge mistake when people do audience interaction to put it. You can, if you want to do any kind of lead generation or get their emails or whatever, you do that after they do it. Now, if you do it over and over again, like we do for this show, we then have a login, and we know that it's going to cut down on the people, but we want to give them other apparatuses like chat and voting and make it even better for them. But if you're doing a one-off show, we tend to use the QR code, and it tends to work really well. But we're very, very careful about, on a single page on a phone, it has to be all in one, that they can be able to see the whole thing. 3 or 4 things, like their name, their location, their question, and maybe one other field. But people get, the problem is event companies get into all this other stuff that they want to add on to it, and when doing events, you have to separate what do we think is cool as an event company, and what does the audience really care about, and that they are often two very different things. We're bored. We do this all the time. We don't even care what the content is on the stage. That's what a lot of us are doing that are going corporate are like. And so that's so we're constantly looking for the next new thing, but does the audience actually care about that? And rarely do those line up.
So are we coming up, is it 9 years now, Alex, since we had the dig?
The dig. Yeah. We didn't use the QR code for that. If you search really close, if you search through, I'm not going to belabor it here, but if you searched into Facebook, you'll see the HBO event that was announcing the dates for Game of Thrones, and that's where we used kinetic interaction, where we let you turn a flamethrower on, and we were getting 130,000 interactions a minute. It was intense, and anyway, that's
fire.
Yeah, exactly. All they had to do was type fire. It was crazy.
Next question.
This one's from Rayon Smith in Trinidad, West Indies. Can I control Sony cameras with ATEM switchers through Middle Control app?
Alexander?
That's what they certainly claim. I think we were talking about this last week. You'll want to make sure, Rayon, that you check their compatibility document to make sure the camera, if you are using a Sony camera, that Sony camera is on their list of tested cameras. I don't know of anyone in the community who's actually gone out and purchased a license to actually test this, and I certainly don't have a Sony camera, so I can't really speak to that. But if you go to this page here on the Middle Things website, they have actually a really nice little interface here where you can actually go in and you just type in the camera that you got here, and it'll show you if it's compatible or not. So that's what I would suggest you do.
My favorite revelation from this video was that there's an Ethernet to USB-C adapter that you can use with the FX3 and the FX30. Of course there is, but I feel like I should have known that because mine sits here on Wi-Fi so I can do camera control. To get in a little bit more of the specific controls that you can use with the Sony camera, they actually put on the video. You can see it's not quite the same level of, not quite the same level of granular control that you get with the Blackmagic cameras, but you do get white balance and tint, as well as your ISO, your shutter, and your iris and focus control. So pretty slick. There is a video link in Rion's question, and it's very nice to see that integration and how things are moving back and forth. Next question.
This one is coming in from CJ Covell in Cincinnati, Ohio. What does the panel think of formatting a Synology NAS, that's network attached storage, in a traditional RAID versus their proprietary BRTFS format?
John Wallace.
So I think you're mixing up two concepts here. The better file system isn't actually, it's not RAID. It's actually just how the data is stored and used by the Linux operating system. So you can have a traditional RAID using that better file system, or you can use it, NTFS or all these different file formats that we have for different operating systems.
What I meant to say was the SHR, Synology Hybrid RAID versus the traditional RAID. I conflated two different concepts. That's my bad, John.
Yeah. I think it all comes down to what feature sets you want. Using, this is what, copy on write is the big thing with the better FS. It's not available in the normal Linux file system. And then it just looks at what capability you need, what reliability you need. There's some, corners cut to provide some extra features. So it just really comes down into what you find acceptable as far as risk goes. And again, RAID isn't backup, so making sure you have a backup separately than this. That doesn't depend on data coming over in real time.
Yeah, I'm in the process right now of I'm upgrading one of my Synologies to the 8-bay version, and then I'm taking the older 5-bay version and moving that to be my off-site clone for the things that aren't otherwise backed up to a cloud service. And I was digging through the settings last night, and it got me thinking about all those things. But thank you very much for also for helping set me straight. It was an early morning this morning, and I mixed up the SHR and the BRTFS. I appreciate it. Next question.
This one is coming in from TJ Asher in Minneapolis, Minnesota, USA. Canon just announced the R6 Mark III. It has the same output sensor as the C50, but it is oriented more towards stills, having nearly as many video modes, but no XLR inputs, and $1,000 less. Would this be a viable alternative for someone to dabble with video?
Alexander.
Well, I mean, it looks like a great camera. It's definitely a full-frame camera. I don't know anyone that would dabble with video and, shell out $3,500 for a camera like that. But clearly it's, trying to compete with the other cameras in the market in that price range from Sony. If we take a look at it here, it shows you some of the specs here, 32.5 megapixels, clearly geared towards more stills. I mean, they're really punching up this concept of doing 40 FPS photo shooting, which is really, really fast. So yeah, if you're a stills photographer and you need a full frame camera, that might be a good choice. My question would be, if you're going to get into video with something like this, is do they offer some kind of XLR hot shoe accessory for this? I don't know if they do. If they don't, may or may not be a deterrent. A lot of people record audio separately and then merge it in post for doing YouTube content. So that may not be a deterrent for a lot of people. In fact, I know a lot of content creators that don't actually record their audio at the same time as their video. They often have separate chains for that. So that may not be an issue.
Bill?
Shooting stills and shooting video are two different disciplines. You can do the same thing on both on a particular device, and obviously ever since the 5D Mark II kind of broke open the idea of using a still camera to capture video, that is a form factor that has run rampant through the entire video industry, for better or for worse. You can pick that. But for me, the big key here is still shooters work differently than video shooters. Interestingly, my wife works for a news organization, and they just bought second bodies for most of their reporters who are out there doing photojournalism, because these have become so cheap now. And Canon says that this Mark II, R6 Mark II body, $1,889. What I think you will see there is people with two cameras slung around them. They'll have one lens on the first camera and a different kind of lens on the second. And for high-intensity shooting circumstances, that is common to see photographers do. So if you primarily shoot stills, this may be a useful thing like that, even if its retail is higher than that. But it's just how you work. I don't think the same when I'm shooting stills as I think when I'm shooting video. So I don't ever expect one camera to do both of those things extremely well.
Alex.
Yeah, if you have a Canon, maybe, but I'm kind of like if you're in the Canon ecosystem, I guess this makes sense, But I find that a lot of times that's what these companies are kind of working towards, is that you have they have to try to hang on to, they're not trying to persuade you to move over to them. They're just trying to hang on to their own photographers, making sure that they have the thing that they need in that vertical.
Courtney.
Yeah, and it's I found the price to be $2,700 or $2,800 for just the body, and it's kind of like a DSLR. It's built like a DSLR, except it's mirrorless. So that's how they achieve that 40 frames per second high speed shooting. Since there's no mirror to get out of the way, they can shoot 40 frames per second and transfer a full frame sensor to the SD cards, which I think it has 2 SD cards that it can hold in that slot. So it's an interesting, I guess, for sports photography, still photography, as well as doing a little bit of video on the side. And of course, like was said, Bill, a lot of DSLRs, like the one I'm talking to you right now on Canon, is especially the EOS series, have a mic input. They have a mic on them for doing a scratch track and or feeding an external audio in, so that you can then record double system with high quality microphones on a high quality recorder, 32-bit recorder, and then just synchronize them in post to that guide track, or scratch track, which is recorded with the video file. So it serves a purpose, mirrorless, and $2,800 without the lens. Not too bad a price for something that could do that.
And getting, what is it, 7K raw at 60p is also it's, I don't know, if I still have a lot of EF glass. It makes me excited. I'm not in the market. I've started to shift. I've hit this this inflection point where if I'm shooting stills, I'm still shooting with my Canon glass, and I've got a whole setup just for the Canon glass. And then all of the video stuff started moving to Sony, because the way that the color reproduction is, the way that the autofocus works, all of that stuff has made it's taken the cognitive load out of doing run and gun stuff or event coverage. It's not, if you're doing more of a narrative or theatrical where you have a much more controlled environment, I understand that those things aren't as important. But for me, when I'm mostly doing event coverage, the stuff that the Sony brings makes a big difference for me. Bill?
Yeah, I just wanted to note that I was looking at the specs, and when I saw that the ISO range runs from 100 to 102,400, I just wanted to ruminate on how far light gathering in sensors has come these days. That's unbelievable. I know they're trying to take a little bit of a shot at Sony's amazing light gathering reputation, which has been amazing, but they're just different than anything we had 10 years ago. There's been so much improvement in the technology of cameras. It's almost jaw-dropping.
And the one thing that they haven't cracked yet is the menu system. It's still the same Canon
Amen
menu
to
system.
that. Yeah.
Next question.
This one is from Roscoe Jones in Madison, Indiana. If I want to use an Apple TV for Keynote on the road but not use the local Wi-Fi, how would you set up your M1 MacBook, router, and ATV? Can Mac still make a local wireless network, and would you do it that way?
John.
I'm really struggling to understand the value, because I would not use wireless from the actual device to connect to the Apple TV. I would find that very inconsistent. The power, depending on how large the room is, would probably not be ideal. And if you're going to run Ethernet, why not just run the HDMI cable directly from your computer? I think it's just an unnecessary piece.
Alex?
I've actually done this a lot. so they don't need to be on the same Wi-Fi network. They just have to have Wi-Fi on. It's usually Wi-Fi as a handshake. You just turn the Wi-Fi on both of them. They should see each other. I find it easier if we're in a room that's really less than 30 feet away. If I want to be at a station in front of everybody and have a TV that I'm pushing off to, or a projector in the back, if obviously John's right that if I can wire into it, I'm going to wire into it. I'm not going to do this but I have an Apple TV that I travel with often, so that if I need to put something in and just drop something down, I can. I also use it for my iPhone. If I've done presentations where I have to show something like a camera, and I'll have my iPhone and I will throw it to the Apple TV somewhere else that might be hooked into a switcher or something else, so I can do a close up, on something. So those are two use cases.
Yeah, and I also have a lot of good scars using the Apple TV. It's just ad hoc. Like Alex said, they don't need to necessarily be joined to the same Wi-Fi network. I actually find when you're in a not your home territory Wi-Fi, it's nice to have neither device on a Wi-Fi network, because then all of the Wi-Fi bandwidth is just spent talking to one another. And we used to do 3 or 4 conventions a year where an Apple TV on the back of a flat screen was part of our trade show, and whoever happened to be in the booth could open up their Mac, open up their iPhone, open up their iPad, and then just mirror to that device. Now, you can put a password on it so that not anybody walking by can come in and take over your trade show booth. But even in that contested Wi-Fi environment, we had very few dropouts, and you're running that for 5 or 6 hours a day, and it worked very, very consistently for us. Courtney?
Yeah, question maybe Alex can illuminate me here, since I don't have an Apple TV. Doesn't it use AirPlay to connect between your computer and over a private 5 gigahertz or 2.4 gigahertz channel to hit the Apple TV?
Yeah,
so that you're not sharing
uses
the same. You're sharing the same bandwidth, but not necessarily the same traffic as the local Wi-Fi.
That's correct. Yeah, and they're just talking to each other. Now, there's a funny thing about AirPlay too. It depends on what you're playing out too. If a Keynote file, it's going to be sending that frame to the Apple TV, or if you're playing something from photos, it'll send that photo to the Apple TV. If you're playing a live stream from the web, it actually hands that HLS off to the TV. You'll notice there's a little delay because it hands it off, and the TV actually runs that locally. So then it needs internet to make that happen. But if it doesn't have that internet,
Chromecast does the same. Yeah. Right. Okay. Thank you.
Next question.
This one's from Paul Valhus in Austin, Texas. What are high output distributed mode speakers, and what niches will they fulfill in the speaker industry?
Alexander.
I don't know anything about these other than the fact that I know Marty, I think this is Marty Atias' company, and 7 months ago, back in March, we did a office hours global special flat panel speakers. So I would suggest you look it up. If you go to our channel and just search, or just go to the YouTube search and type in flat panel office hours, you'll find this video where he goes into a lot of detail about this. This is the website. You can see the speakers here. They are incredibly thin. Very interesting technology. I just don't really know much about it, nor have I heard it, so I can't really comment. But you may want to reach out to Marty because he's part of our community.
Courtney?
Yeah, these are kind of curious. It's kind of like, when they take a line array that they curve so that they generate curved sound space that goes out and reaches a large area. They apparently say that these speakers are designed to be used in very live environments, like the Vatican or somewhere where you've got a lot of marble walls and stained glass and stuff that you can't cover up with sound dampening. So they have this curved emitter. It's flat panel, but it's actually curved, so it distributes the sound rather than a cone, which kind of focuses the pressure wave. This spreads it out and disperses it in a much larger area of compression and pressure changes. So that it deals with echoey rooms a lot better than a standard conical type speaker that you put out there. But it looks like you have to mount it. I don't know if you can recess mount it into a ceiling or not. Maybe you can, but it seems to have some type of, on the back of the speaker, it looks like it's got either some ports or some high frequency tweeters on the back. I'm not sure. I haven't looked at how it's cut apart or opened up, but it looks interesting for situations where you have to reach a large audience in a live situation.
Next question.
This one's CJ Covell, Cincinnati, Ohio, and he's asking, what's the best way to sync assets on frame.io to a local hard drive or directly to a NAS?
Alex?
I think to download them and put them on. I don't know if there's any automatic way. Is there a way to do this? No,
I'm
I don't
asking
think
because
so.
I've got these massive files I've got to download, and it's tying up a computer for a day and a half. And I was like, man, it would be nice if because there are a bunch of cloud sync. You can set it up as a WebDAV. You can set up Synology's Cloud Sync to any WebDAV service. So it doesn't necessarily have to be written just for it. And I know that there's, in the developer documentation for Frame, there was some REST API stuff you could kind of roll your own.
You could have someone ask. I mean, I have to admit, I consider Dropbox like a virus because it does this.
Oh, yeah.
I don't ever let it do auto syncing because I just don't trust it.
It messes up your computer. It feels like it gets a lot. So what my way around this, because I want to have the files locally, but I don't want to give Dropbox the hooks into my machine, or OneDrive, or Google Drive, or Ice Drive, or any of these other drives, is I hook it up via one of the Synologies is just a cloud mirror. And it just sits there, and that box talks to Dropbox and all those other things, so that when I need to get it on any of my local machines, boom, 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 I'm not messing up my computer, but I still have all the files locally. And this one, I was like, I guess I'm going to use the transfer app and sync.
And even then, I mean, I don't know whether the trouble is on my, with my ISP, because I just have Comcast, but I know that I'm having a lot of trouble downloading really large files. When they get up into the hundreds of gigs, even with the transfer app, it's like getting part of the way there and then just stopping. And I don't know whether that's a traffic shaping thing from Comcast or whether it's I'm told that Comcast doesn't do that, but it sure does feel like it.
I've got a fiber connection, and I started to download about 9 o'clock last night of a project that had about 1.67 terabytes, give or take. And it downloaded about a terabyte overnight, and it was okay. I found the transfer app was considerably faster than downloading over the browser. But even then, it was I was just looking at the thing, and even it was bouncing between 500 megs and a gig download speed in the transfer app. And I'm like, man, this is still going to take 20 hours. These files are getting huge.
Yeah, it shouldn't take that long even with that size. But yeah.
I love that. I love that we're getting to the point with all of these video formats where we're pushing it again. All of the physical limitations where you're like, we're waiting on the computer.
I think it's funny that I can still remember telling someone, well, 20 gigs is too much to download online. Like you can't do that. So we've come a long way.
John?
Yeah, Alex, I'm just curious. Did you have the issue with large downloads before you switched to Unify, the Ubiquitous?
I don't know. It's been so long. You think the Unify is doing it?
There's potentially like the intrusion detection stuff, the extra security, could be causing some issues with it not being able to scan the long files and causing to break up. So that'd be something I would look at if it's not something you remember happening before.
I can't yeah, I don't think I've ever downloaded files this many files this large. And what's interesting is it stops at different times. And sometimes if you keep doing it, it'll slowly get it out. But that's a really good point. And the problem is now my Unify is my modem as well. So there's no way for me to like.
Well, you can turn off, like you could build a network for your like office and then turn off those security features and see if it's
right.
Yeah.
Okay.
I said frame.io too many times, and I accidentally re-invoked the download, I think, because I started, all of a sudden my Zoom started cracking up. I said, Frame took all my bandwidth.
That's funny.
Next question.
This one's from Douglas Carmichael. California is introducing a law that commercials on streaming services can't be louder than content. How would that be implemented?
Bill?
That would be very difficult. I think that's going to be a challenge. I mean, this is kind of a reflection of what happened at the turn of, I think it was 2009, 10, and 11. They were talking about the Calm Act in Congress, and they eventually passed it. And it said that broadcasters cannot run commercials at a level significantly louder than programming. I mean, I think it was because a lot of people really complained about that because, you know, a bad commercial would wake grandma up in the middle of the night because it was 15 dB louder than the TV show she was going to sleep with. This is a much more technically difficult thing just because the internet is so distributed and you can't really force people to do it. But I think they're laying down a kind of a marker here saying this is a problem. Maybe at some point they can figure out some penalty kind of thing that people who are not complying with some calm equivalent act on the internet would be shamed or something like that. But I don't know technically how they can actually put a limiter on something as diffuse as the internet. That doesn't seem rational to me, but maybe something smarter is out there that I don't know about.
Alex?
They can absolutely limit what it can do. So they can, they definitely can look at what's coming in, and those ads are being delivered to, so when you put something into a service, that service measures everything and tells you what your targets are, and if you go over that, oftentimes they'll just send it back. So YouTube can just tell people like, hey, this is the maximum levels that you can send us, whatever the LUFS level is that we agree to. And YouTube, those ads aren't shown. No, someone's not just randomly submitting those ads and then they show up on YouTube. They go through a whole YouTube process and get packaged and everything else. So YouTube can just tell people that you can't do that, and they won't try to fix it for them. They'll just kick it back to them and say this didn't. They'll just run it through an analyzation tool. This is what like Netflix does. Run it through an analyzation tool. It fails. They send it back and it goes, it failed. Audio failed. They won't even tell you what it is. They'll just say failed, and you'll have to come back. And the reason they don't tell you that is because it keeps all the ad agencies scared because they don't know what it is, and they just kind of just plow it back to you. I don't know if YouTube will. YouTube doesn't do that, but other services do it, and they don't give you a lot of information because they actually want to whack you on the head for it. Like they want you to stay inside of their rails. So they find it easier than trying to like tweak anything, and there's a whole artist intent conversation and everything else. YouTube is already really loud. So I don't know if we're talking about YouTube. I don't know. It is already as loud as my system can run from an Apple TV. So we have to literally turn down the system every time we go to YouTube because it's just the content is so much louder. So I don't know how much louder the ads could be.
Courtney?
Yeah, the CALM Act, which does stand for Commercial Advertisement Loudness Mitigation Act, was enacted in 2012, so it's been around in 2013, I think in December when it actually went into effect. It's enforced by the FCC for broadcasters, and now California is just extending the CALM Act requirements to streaming services. So the problem that they're going to run into in keeping this, and there are limiters, for a broadcast studio that is emanating both the commercials and the program material, they can run it through a limiter so that the average loudness matches between the program content and the commercial content. They, at one time, built a lot of the stuff. There was a signal that built a lot of the stuff into the actual television sets that you're playing it back on to equalize the commercial, to tell it, oh, this is a commercial, because the problem you run into is with locally sourced. A lot of times there's local commercial insertions into the network broadcast. So you're not doing it from master control or where the broadcast is emanating from. A lot of times the commercials are coming from a local television station when the show is coming from the network. And in streaming, it gets even worse because they're inserting specific commercials, depending upon your browser habits, in the middle of programming. And the volume on your computer is not a television set, and it may not be controlled in the same fashion. So they're going to have a really hard time enforcing this unless they get everybody to adapt the same hardware. There's some type of software that's required to equalize this stuff at the viewer's location. I don't know how well this is going to work, because even as I go from streaming source to streaming source, from YouTube to Vimeo to Netflix, the volume changes drastically between those different sources, and I've got to adjust the volume anyway. So maybe they'll figure out a way to do it.
Bill?
Just as a pragmatic thing, for the last 10, 15 years, I've had to deliver 2 versions of every spot I've created for broadcast. One at negative 24 LUFS, particularly for the broadcast outlets, NBC, CBS, ABC, the networks and things like that. And then one at negative 16 LUFS, which is designed for everything on the internet. So there's already, the web is louder technically than TV is. So now you're trying to level the web, and there's variations that are causing people to be upset even within that negative 16 limit. So there are all sorts of clever technical things people do in bandwidth limiting and EQ to make things perceivably louder. And if there's ever something like that possible, advertisers will do it. I'll just tell you flat out. They want their ad to cut through the mix.
Alex?
Yeah, if you're wondering how it's going to be implemented, fines. That's how they're going to implement it. They're going to say all you have to do is look at you can literally, for most of these, if you're looking at the waveform, you'll just see the state of California will have if they establish an organization, someone will send in a complaint about a certain one. They'll go to it, they'll see the level, and they'll literally just look at the waveform. And if the waveform jumps up where the ad is and then jumps back down where the content is, someone's going to have to pay a penalty for it. And that's how the state's going to do it. And then everybody else has to figure it out.
And then Scott Tupper in the chat mentioned the idea, why couldn't it be monitored, attenuated at the player? Mickey came in and said YouTube already does this. Appreciate everybody in the chat. There's a lot of great conversation going on in there. And if you're watching us on YouTube, we're happy you're here, but you're missing the chat. You're missing all the live stuff. We're on every single morning at 7 a.m. Pacific, and that's in Makana. And that's your chance to ask questions in real time. You can vote on what gets answered. And my favorite part, which is really half the show. It's the great chat that's going on all day long. Some of the most connected, engaged people. There's a lot. So check it out, officehours.global/join. If you want to sign up for that, just go to officehours.global/join. Sign up for the mailing list there. You'll get all the links to get into all the inside scoop. Next question.
This one's from Craig Kadoki in Toronto, Canada. The GenericOSC module and companion can listen for incoming messages. How do I set up a trigger to store one part of that message as a variable to be displayed on a button?
Guy?
Yeah, the part of this question where it says one part, I'm not sure about the one part, but this is a question where ChatGPT just eats this stuff up. So basically, you're going to set up a button to listen for generic OSC commands, and I jumped into ChatGPT just to see what the next step was, and it's create a trigger that fires when your message arrives. But it's a matter of how do you parse that. So this is, again, where just keep asking ChatGPT to drill it down. But you can display the whole thing on a button by using these commands. And I'll put a link to this one. So message arrives, trigger watches for the path, and then when it arrives, it sets the variable, and then the button text pops up. So there's some JSON code that you could import into Companion once you figure out the pieces of the puzzle that you need. But I'll put a link to this one by hitting share here. And this is where ChatGPT is your friend.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asks, has anyone used a nano SSD with their iPhone 17 Pro to record ProRes?
Alex?
Yeah, this looks, I haven't used it, but it looks fantastic. So if it works, this is the 2 terabyte. This has got a little LCD that'll tell you where it's at. It passes that through, so it will pass it through. It looks really cool. Here's the concern: is that most SSDs that are 2 terabytes, how fast is it writing? And will it write that speed all the way through? And the smaller you make it and the more LCDs and other thing that you put on it, the heat dissipation becomes a problem. And when the heat dissipation becomes a problem, it slows down. It slows down. And so the problem, the danger that you have with this little thing, it looks very, very convenient, but the danger you have is that it won't write sustained at the highest ProRes speeds all the way through 2 terabytes. My guess is this will, if I was going to guess, I'd say somewhere between 800 and 1,000 gigs. It will slow down dramatically and not be readable. Like it won't be writable, for the ProRes. And so you really have to. I'm already getting to a point where my iPhone 17 is capable of writing something that I have to get really high performance SSDs to capture. So if you're doing Apple ProRes RAW, for instance, out of an iPhone 17, which you can, which is crazy, it requires very, very fast hardware, receiving hardware to make it work.
And then there's always a general reminder when recording onto SSDs that because of the way that they handle wear leveling, as that SSD gets more full and more full, the write speeds tend to slow down because the SSD needs to spend more time looking for what block to write that onto.
Yeah, you should never. If you need 2 gigs, you should get 4 gigs. If you need 1 terabyte, if you need 4 terabytes for 2 terabytes of record, but never assume that you can fill up an SSD with the content.
Next question.
Caleb Groom in Pinehurst, North Carolina asks, I use BirdDog players connected to TVs to play NDI sources. However, I've always wondered why there aren't Roku apps or native smart TV apps to play NDI videos. Any thoughts why this doesn't exist already?
Alexander?
There is on Apple TV. I don't know about Roku, but there's an app called Sienna, and it costs $100 to be able to play back an NDI stream. With NDI, there are licensing fees involved in some aspects of utilizing it, so I imagine that's probably why. And apps like Sienna, they charge $100 for that because they don't want to eat the cost of the license. So that's my suspicion.
Courtney?
Yeah, I think you just have to hammer on VizRT to release an NDI player that for those specific for Roku, Fire TV, Apple TV, etc. Because there's a VLC player, and VLC will support NDI playback and generation to playback from VLC over NDI and to receive NDI. But you got to install NDI tools as a plugin for that to work. And most of the Rokus, you can't really install NDI tools on a Roku even though there's a VLC player that I have it on my Fire TV and it's on a number of platforms the VLC will work on. The question is it's not native, the decode, because there's that tariff, because there's a licensing fee that you have to pay for NDI. That's why they don't include it in the open source VLC player. So until somebody who has that license makes a player, we're stuck without it, I guess.
John?
I think also most of these devices don't have wired connections, and NDI over wireless is less than ideal.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just keep on going. You're good.
No, I just really think that it's the processing power that they have to be able to decode the video. The fact that most people will try this over Wi-Fi, it won't work well. Then they'll blame NDI, so that's a bad name brand recognition for them. That's where I think the investment's made, and it's a purpose, but it's expensive to get it on the Apple TV, and then they're expecting someone to understand and know how to use that. And so that barrier of entry is beneficial for them.
All right, now that I'm done stepping on John, I'll step on over to Guy.
Well, John got it. When I was researching on GitHub, the OMT interaction with being able to pull feeds across on low-level devices, they basically said the same thing. It's the processing power of the FPGAs aren't strong enough to decode, and some of them will do, like a Raspberry Pi 5 will do 720, so there's something called decaffeine that runs on Pi, and even that one is limited. So it's all about decode processing power. So the Apple TV with Sienna is what I use, and it's got the horsepower inside of it.
You can ask questions 24/7 at askofficehours.global. That's askofficehours.global. Nothing to sign up for, nothing to log into. Just go to askofficehours.global. put in your name, put in your question, and we'll start getting into those as we start the show next week. Next question.
Brian Taylor in Washington, D.C. asks, I've just been made aware of Canva's free Affinity platform. What's the hub-bub on Affinity, and will it release me from reliance on the web Photoshop clone app Photopea during my Adobe protest?
Alex.
Yeah, I think that this is the new Affinity. Now, we thought that when Canva bought Affinity, we were like, well, what's going to happen now? And turns out, not only did they not increase the prices, they made it free. In addition to that, they did something else that's kind of interesting. They incorporated them all. So now you have a vector, you can switch to pixel, all in the same document. You're changing your levels. And so so they've kind of merged them all together. I think that Adobe Photoshop has a place for people like me. The generative fill is still better than what this does, and I use generative fill a lot. The alpha channels are something that I use regularly, and there's a bunch of other tools that I use in Photoshop that I don't think I could get rid of anytime soon. For almost everybody else, this may be a solution that, if you're on a Mac, this may be a solution that you're going towards. And I think Affinity will probably make it available on a PC eventually. But the thing is that it's been a Mac app for so long, it might take some time for it to get over to the PC. But I will say that I don't think that Adobe's entry level are going to be able to compete with Affinity. And the reason for that is that Affinity is going for Photoshop, and Adobe has to dumb down. They're trying to not give you all the features of Photoshop so that you end up with Photoshop. And that's been the problem with Photoshop, elements and other things like that. And so I think that it's a really interesting approach. I have used Affinity for a lot of things, mostly because I'm always trying to figure out if I can stop paying for Photoshop. But so far I haven't gotten to a point any time in my life since 1992 where I felt like I could go a week or two without Photoshop. so I'm working on it.
Courtney.
Yeah, I think the days of Photoshops, unfortunately, I am an Adobe shareholder, full disclosure. I think the days of Photoshop are numbered. My sister sent me a couple of photos that I'm pretty good at cleaning up stuff. I've been using Photoshop since, version 2 or 3. And she sent me some photos of her that were, 40 years old. And, these were printed photos that were scanned in. So they've all turned red. And it was 3 girls, and they had these numbers painted on their cheeks like it was their 40. They were all turned 41 or something. Anyway, so she sent me this picture, and it was a faded, turned red picture. And I thought, well, maybe I'll see if I can clean it up in Photoshop. I loaded it into Gemini's, which now uses Nano Banana built in 2.5 AI. I just load that photo into Gemini. I said, fix the colors. It took 3 or 4 tries. First, the colors were so faded, it just turned it into a black and white. And I said, no, colorize it. And it colorized it, made a beauty. And I said, make it look like a Kodachrome print from the 70s. And it did that. It brought all the color back to normal colors. And they still had these red numbers painted on their cheeks. And I just said, remove the red numbers painted on their cheeks. Next version, they were gone. And it was amazing. It took almost 30 seconds to do. And it would have taken me hours and, with Clone Brush and all the tools in Photoshop to readjust all the colors, get the color back. And I don't even know if I could even recovered the color because it makes up colors. Nano Banana will make up colors if it doesn't find them and can actually colorize black and white photos to look any kind of color saturation. So I think the days of retouching, using Affinity and other photo editing programs for retouching stuff this looked as good as the original. It didn't make up anything new. Everything was exactly the same as the original photograph as far as content goes.
Alex.
Yeah, and if you're doing photo retouching, I think that could be the case. I mean, Photoshop now has a lot of generative tools as well to do the same thing. So you wouldn't use a clone tool in Photoshop anymore either. But what I will say is that for those of us who use it on a technical level, there's just a lot of it's not photo retouching. We do very little photo retouching. It is other technical things that we need to do to prep documents that make Photoshop valuable. So I think that is where Photoshop still has a hold on a certain number of people. I don't know I don't know how big that part of the pyramid is, but for a lot of us, there are technical things we need to do to a document, whether it's building out the layers, building out the elements, doing all the, there's alpha channels, there's lots of things that we have to do with a photo that is more of a truck problem than a car problem. What you're talking about is really a car problem. Like it's like what an average person needs to do with their photos. And I think that you're 100% right that generative tools will do most of that. But the truck problem of we've got all these things that we have to do for printing out posters and building slides for things, that is where, but even like, for instance, when I build slides for broadcast now, unless I get pushed into a corner, almost all of them are built in Keynote because I can just, I might prep some stuff, but it's much easier for me to move it around when the client asks for, hey, can you move this over? It's actually way easier to do it in Keynote than it is in Photoshop.
Next question.
This one's from Tommy Shantz in St. Paul, Minnesota. What is your go-to hardware streaming encoder and why? Let's not include Blackmagic.
Alex.
Yeah, the ones that we use for the show are Videon. We have Videon Max and Videon Edge encoders that we have here, and I use those as well. And other projects that I work on are the Videon Edge encoders. The Teradek Prisms are a pretty slick encoders in the sense that they'll do 10-bit 422 encoding, and they're pretty useful in that area. So the Prisms are pretty cool. And then the ones that I used for many years and still use for some of the projects are Elementals. I mean, that's the big, like, when you want to make it go away, you want all the features, and you're willing to spend $50,000 a unit. The Elementals are at a completely different level than most of the other things. But what I would say is, on a day-to-day basis, the Videon encoders have turned out to be really great. And what's great about them is being able to administer them from the cloud relatively easily.
John?
Yeah, I'll second the Videon encoders are great. The Osprey Talons, those are also very good if you're not doing anything at 4K 60. They seem to struggle there, but I mean, most people aren't pushing live streams that far. So I would say those are pretty solid units, especially if they have a proper cooling. And then you can really get into something cool like the little Zowie boxes are really nice, really affordable. It's not something I would use on a bunch of productions, but it's great little problem solver to have in your kit. So it depends on how you want to use it, what's the purpose for it. And then I really do enjoy for the churches, the Resi platform, their hardware encoder. It works really, really well. It's got some built-in buffer end because we know churches love to skip on their internet. So it kind of helps buffer that experience and make sure your viewers are getting a really solid experience.
So Alex, where is the green elemental? I was wondering what was off. It's not there in the frame.
I think I must have unplugged it by accident. There's not an actual elemental back there. What happened was that Elemental switched the front plates to orange when they were bought by Amazon, and I hate the orange front plates. And so when they updated them, I kept all my green plates. So all I have are the front plates for the Elementals. I have a small collection of them because I was like, I'm not giving up my plates, because I think the orange is just atrocious, and the green ones were gorgeous. So anyway, there you go.
Next question.
Alval, who's in Austin, Texas. How does the DJI Osmo Mobile 8 smartphone gimbal with Apple DockKit support and 360-degree pan rotation compared to the Insta360 Flow gimbal camera?
Guy.
We haven't talked about Apple's DockKit on this show, and it's actually really cool. So this is a Belkin that I bought a while back, and it's got DockKit on it, and it works natively with FaceTime, with Blackmagic cameras. I'm running the Blackmagic camera app, and it's tracking me. So this has got a quarter 20 on the bottom, and I use it on FaceTime calls, and it just follows me around. So I'll set it down in my kitchen and be on FaceTime calls. So the DockKit stuff is just amazing. And the reason why I bought this is a friend of mine wrote an app called the Smart PTZ app, and he's able to tap into this remotely and send an SRT stream. So he's written this app, and I'll put a link in the chat to it, where you can send SRT streams to vMix, but also control, let's say, 2 or 3 iPhones. So I'm hoping that it works with this DJI Osmo, because the Osmo and the Insta360 are new to the market with DockKit, but it's a technology that Apple talked about at the last 2024 Apple Developer Conference, and then not too much was said about it. But for pros, I mean, it's one of those things where you go, man, how could I have some users get a DJI or an Insta360 for cheap and be able to control these things, because the cameras in the iPhone 16, 17 are pretty amazing. And you could even punch into the zoom and adjust color all remotely. So pretty amazing stuff. If I was to buy one today, though, I would get the Osmo, because you do have this module that you could get that does a second level of tracking. So in addition to Apple's tracking, you can get this little, I think it's about $100, and it's a little light, and it also has a microphone, so it can pick up and detect where sounds are coming from and focus over there as well. So out of the two, I'd be looking at the DJI.
Courtney.
Yeah, and I'm not sure whether the gimbals, the horizontal pan gimbal on this 360 Insta360 is a full 360. They're touting that you can set this up to automatically do the security cam auto rotation if you put it onto a tripod here, so that you can put it between two people and continuously rotate 360 degrees. I don't know if there is a stop on the Insta360 where it'll go all the way around and then stop and then have to go back the other direction. Or if it can just continuously rotate. I'm not sure whether has that capability or not. But the nice thing is it does now interface with the apps on the phone. So the apps on the phone can then communicate with the gimbal itself and do face tracking and do all the other things. So you can set it up to do pre-made moves, things like that.
Alex.
Yeah, just remember that if you use DJI, it will not even turn on unless you put the app in and log in and give them all your information and everything else. And so that's the one thing that I find. I mean, I have both of them. I just find it very egregious that DJI does that. Like that, it won't just work at some level without tying into their app. So it won't. But it won't even. The thing won't even activate without the app.
That may change with upcoming legislation that they're thinking of banning DJI imports.
I haven't had that
and they may cut it off
Osmo.
from communicating with.
You may already have the app, but I know that I know I can't get it to even unfold. Like it won't even turn on until I put the app on. As soon as I put the app on, I was like, "Hello," but it wouldn't let me do that. So that's why I stopped buying them. That's why I have an Insta360. It's because I don't want to do that with every phone that I put on it, because a lot of times my phones are dead weight. I use phones that are just cameras. Like they don't have any cellular.
Got it. I've got a 6 and a 7, an Osmo 6 and an Osmo 7, and I hadn't had that. I took them out of the box and used them on just a camera phone, and they didn't give me too much hassle. I'm not sure.
Yeah. It was earlier than that. I don't remember which Osmo it was, but when they did that, I was like, oh, I'm not buying these anymore. So
hopefully they've corrected.
Yeah, maybe they've
Bill?
corrected it. Yeah.
I'm just laughing because the clip Courtney shot, I just wondered, they spent 5 minutes playing with their dog and 4.5 minutes picking up the camera after the dog knocked it over. I can't believe they produced that, because that's all I could think of while I was watching that. You've got a dog and a camera on a little tiny tripod, and you're playing ball between two people. It caused my brain to freeze up.
Next question.
This one's from Roscoe Jones in Madison, Indiana. Any reason to not use an older 1080p Apple TV as a Keynote destination? And do you keep a long Ethernet cable around just in case Wi-Fi doesn't work?
Alex.
Yes. I mean, if I'm doing any when I say I use this Apple TV, I don't use it for anything I'm getting paid for. Like I do this is this is convenient for me to do something. I would not depend on Wi-Fi to do any kind of work that I get paid for. It's not like that's so there's me being convenient when I go speak at a class or doing something else, and then there's me getting paid for something, and then everything's wired. But I don't use Wi-Fi for paid things. So I would definitely bring, if it mattered, I would definitely bring an Ethernet cable, or again, I would consider, if I have a computer, just a fiber HDMI cable, which have gotten dramatically less expensive than the last time I bought them. I have a 100-foot one that I think I paid $40 for or something. It's one way, but it works great. So I think that I would be careful of that. The problem with the 1080p is that it's really old. Like if you're talking about 1080p, I think 4K is 10 years ago. So a 1080p is older than that. And there's a lot of subsystems that aren't going to be supported. It's a much, much slower processor. I don't think I would consider a 1080p much more than like a aquarium on a virtual aquarium on I don't think I would use those anymore.
The radios too are older technology. I've had experience with both because when we send our projectors out into the field, in the case with the projector is a 50-foot HDMI and an Apple TV. And if the Apple TV doesn't work, you unplug the HDMI from the Apple TV and you plug it into your laptop.
Yeah,
but most of the time it works.
I guess the first generation of the 4K was 2017, and so that's 8 years ago. So I don't even know if it may be considered quote unquote legacy by Apple as well.
Hey, if you're enjoying Office Hours and getting some value out of it, we invite you to support us by liking and subscribing to our channel. There are also volunteer opportunities at officehours.global/volunteer, and we are a nonprofit. So we've got officehours.global /donate. Officehours.global/donate is where you can donate to our efforts here and help us keep the lights on and keep the show going. We appreciate it. And there's one more thing. The hats are still available. If you would like a hat, ohgshop.com. We're not extending it. This is the end. Last chance. Get in there. Get that tight fit and good looking OHG baseball cap. It's a good one. Some thank yous for everyone. Thank you so much to our panel for being here today and bringing all of your life experience. You certainly helped me out with a couple questions. And also thank you to our producers for asking those questions and for contributing in the chat, giving us some extra color. And finally, to the bedrock of everything, our back-end crew who's making sure that everything's not only working during the show, but also around the show, keeping us organized and moving forward. We appreciate you as well. Talalic traversal today, 15,000 miles. That's 25,000 kilometers, 121 million bananas for scale. See you in After Hours. Alex, you can't not pay for Photoshop. You'll destabilize a currency. The Alex is still a unit of measure.
Exactly. Although that version hasn't been around for almost 20 years now. So the $700 version hasn't been around. So
Wife's laughing at me. They're making my wife learn Adobe products for the newsroom, so she's having to do her video editing in Premiere. They're just it's like you're useless.
we had a salesperson who turned in an expense report one time, and what wasn't entertaining, and got a Woodford. It was like $40 with dinner, and so we started teasing him every time we went to a hotel. It's like, how many Woodfords was that?